What is up, Spill It Squad? It's your boy Andrew coming at you from the parking lot of my job. I am in my car right now. How appropriate for today's topic, which is Democracy Part 3, Economic Democracy. Now you may be thinking, Andrew, what the hell is economic democracy? Well, if you remember from Part 2 of our Democracy series, Democracy 2, Electric Boogaloo, you may recall that I was talking about how in a lot of Western countries, but in especially the United States, we have a so-called democracy where rich people are allowed to bribe politicians to write laws they want or just outright write the laws they want. And if the rich people support it, it gets passed. If they don't support it, which a lot of poor people tend to support those policies that they don't support, it fails. So, doesn't sound very democratic, does it? So, economic democracy is basically let's level the playing field. Nobody's vote is going to matter more than anybody else. You can't just bribe elected officials to get policies you want just because you have money. Economic democracy effectively refers to that phenomenon where money is not in politics, but also it extends to where we do a lot of our economic activity, which tends to be at our jobs, especially. So, according to the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative, economic democracy is a system where people share ownership and decision-making over the power and resources in their communities. Rather than profit and pure self-interest, it is grounded in values of solidarity, cooperation, democracy, and sustainability. In places that have implemented policies aligning with economic democracy, we have seen reduced inequality and greater general well-being for the public. They have actually pointed to several examples where some level of engagement in economic democracy takes place. I'll give you a few anyway. So, for example, Oakland, California, they have the Mandela Grocery Cooperative, which is a worker-owned grocery store, basically, that supports local farmers to help them obtain ownership in their food enterprises. They also point to the community in San Diego, who has organized to co-own a rundown shopping mall to meet community needs, including grocery stores, restaurants, entertainment, living wage jobs, etc. 20% of ownership was transferred to local residents and another 20% to a resident-led Neighborhood Unity Foundation, which combined invested about $1 million into this mall. Here in Ohio, Cooperation Cincinnati supports family-sustaining jobs and business ownerships opportunities for Black, Latinx, and immigrant communities and is accountable to the communities that drive it. They've created at least 10 new worker-owned enterprises and work with retiring business owners to create more local employee-owned enterprises. Shy Fresh Kitchen in Chicago has created more and better opportunities for formerly incarcerated people to take shared ownership in their work after release from prison. The Bronx also has the Black Farmer Fund, a Democratic community investment fund to support farmers and food-based entrepreneurs across the state to help them feed and support their families the way they do for us. In Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, community leaders have worked to launch a community-owned food co-op that will also serve as a hub for building more worker-owned food businesses and will source from Black and cooperatively owned farmers. The late Nipsey Hussle, may he rest in peace, he actually, at the time of his death, was working on a community investment fund, Our Opportunity, to invest in a shared ownership future where Black Lives Mattered, trying to create investment vehicles to facilitate resource pooling, resist gentrification, and create local and cooperative economic opportunities in Los Angeles. Cooperative Home Care Associates is a worker-owned home care business which has yielded better results for the providers and recipients of the care of that health and home care. And that's just some of them. They have done, there are many other examples around the country. I will actually be linking that website down below so you can check out what other stuff is being done. So that brings us to workplace democracy, which a few of those things actually are in that vein of workplace democracy. Now you're probably thinking, what's that? It's exactly what it sounds like, actually. We get to vote for the politicians, but the CEOs, bosses, and owners of our workplace get to influence legislation in the political sphere, and we don't get to vote for those people. Like, we don't get to vote for the owner of your company that you work for. We don't get to recall the owner of the company. Workplace democracy would give employees the power in their job. Employees can vote out shitty owners and managers and make collective decisions for their workplaces, such as more efficient practices, better cost of service, better wages, better working conditions, better work-life balance, things like that. Now, workplace democracy can actually be seen in a variety of different ways. But I found two that are more common and one that I find pretty interesting, actually. So the first one we're going to talk about is unions. You've probably heard of a union. There was a huge wave of union activity in the last couple years, especially for like Starbucks and Amazon. So what is a union? A union is a collective bargaining organization wherein a designated third-party representative for the workers comes in to negotiate better conditions, such as pay, benefits, a work environment, etc., with the employer. Unions, they have to file a petition with the employer and a federal agency known as the National Labor Relations Board to be recognized. This formality gives workers the option to switch to another union or even create a guild. Which is basically where workers in a certain trade represent themselves. So it's kind of just like being a union, but it's just the workers do it more directly. And it's usually for like a trade. Unions can be a trade union representing a certain trade or craft, including independent contractors or employees across companies and businesses, or labor unions, which represent the staff employees hired by an employer, like workers in a specific Starbucks or a specific Amazon facility. Shout out to Chris Smalls. Love the work you do. Keep fighting the good fight. This is, like I said, similar to a guild where workers within a certain trade represent themselves. Now, according to the Economic Policy Institute, 16.2 million U.S. workers were union represented in 2023, which is up 191,000 from 2022. So good work, guys. Evidence says upwards of 60 million workers wanted to join a union in 2023, but were unable to, according to laborsoft.com. So, we know all this, but, there's got to be some good and bad to this, right? So, I'm going to go through those. The pros: workers usually receive higher wages, on average 11.2% higher than non-union workers, and also states without union protections tend to have lower wages. Black, Latinx, and women workers also receive 26%, 39.2%, and 23.8% more money, respectively, than their non-union counterparts. So, unions do tend to offer better money, but also in that same vein, it helps with competition because other non-union places around there are going to be like, oh no, they're paying more. They can just go to the union store down the street. I'm going to raise my wages. Like, Walmart down the street from me actually makes a little bit more than I do here actually in a union. But that's partially because, there's the competition in that market. Also, unions tend to offer better benefits. 96% of union employees have employer-provided benefits compared to 69% of non-union workers. Retirement benefits: 54% of union employees get pensions compared to 8% of non-union workers, and 82% of union workers have other retirement benefits as opposed to 48% of non-union workers. 93% of union workers get paid sick leave compared to 75% of non-union workers. They have better regulations on their working conditions, as in there's a limit to how many hours they're allowed to work you, overtime, compensation, safety practices. You may have seen the bumper sticker, like, if you like your weekend, thank a union. Same concept. Unions can also negotiate protections that ensure job security, as in they can't just fire you for no fucking reason. So, like, they can't just be like, oh, I don't like him, so fuck him, he's out, They have to, there's like a whole process that they have to go through to be able to terminate somebody when it comes to a union. So you get that job security better with a union. And for employers, it's actually beneficial because they can better predict future operational costs, because usually wages are set by a contract that goes out 3 to 5 years usually. Unions also provide professional development and job training for workers, which is always beneficial to employers. They don't want to have to pay to train you. There's also formalized grievance and arbitration processes, so you can't just go complain to your boss and then suddenly they get to act shitty to you without consequences. Things like that. or anytime there's a conflict between a manager and an employee, then there are proper channels that you can go to file a complaint and get action taken on that matter. And unions also help to set broader economic trends through their work. Now you're probably thinking, okay, so that's all the good shit. What about the bad? So some people will point to union dues being a problem, which, I mean, if you're not a big fan of taxes, I don't see you being a big fan of union dues either. But union dues, they're just a little fee that you pay to the union to support operational costs, and it's also money that goes in, like, say you have to go on strike or something, those union dues help to at least cover some of your wages while you're on strike. But usually, in my experience anyway, union dues are fairly low. Mine are like $10 to $20 a week, out of like 460, 480 or so. So I mean, it's not like a crazy amount or nothing, but also sometimes that $10 to $20 a week can add up. So I mean, I get it. There's also less employee autonomy because union rules, you got to follow them. Like, obviously, they're not going to support you if you're not following the rules set forward by the contract, obviously. Seniority also tends to get favored, so newer employees may face slower advancement opportunities or be more likely to be terminated if the conditions require that people have to get laid off. You're going to get rid of the people who are newer. So it is just an unfortunate reality that those with more seniority are more likely to get the better deal. There's also the risk of unpaid labor stoppages, although usually it's not completely unpaid. Like, union dues do fund at least partial payment should a strike be called. And employees may be bound to union contract decisions they disagree with. Like I said, you got to follow the rules, and you may not necessarily agree with all of them, but, you know, that's just life. You got to follow rules you don't like to follow. There can also be tension that rise between managers who are not covered by a union contract versus employees who are covered by a union contract. So we've also seen examples of it, like where a union worker will file a grievance against their manager or something, but then the manager starts acting shady to them and trying to find excuses to get rid of them. So there is the possibility of that, but also retaliation, they can fight that a little better. It is also harder to promote strong workers and dismiss weaker performing workers. And, you know, sometimes that does suck when you are doing so well and you're watching other people not do well and then nothing's happening to them. But, you know, at the end of the day, in my opinion, everybody got to collect a paycheck, and not everybody's going to be good at their job. Just let people be bad at their jobs. But I can understand where the frustration of that comes in because I feel it sometimes. Strikes can also disrupt businesses or business for the company. So it's like if you go on strike, then suddenly the company is out of a workforce for the time being unless they hire scabs. And if you're a scab, fuck you. Then the site also, the website also cites reduced competition due to higher wages and benefits. Like, it was my understanding that the competition should be like, oh, they're raising the wages, well, I gotta compete and raise my wages. But the reduced competition probably comes from, like, I can't compete when I'm not making as much extra profit. So I do plan to do something about the basis of profit as a video concept. So stay tuned for that one at some point. It can also be higher costs for the employers because, you know, higher wages, more benefits, all these other processes that got to be accounted for, which may have to raise the prices, which again, I will discuss that at length. There's not necessarily a reason to raise prices just because wages go up. It just means the business gets less in profit. But the whole thing of a business is to collect profit. And I also kind of make the argument, just in my own experience, that sometimes unions can have a certain favoritism that is not necessarily intentional, but a lot of times unions are having too few representatives for too many employees to be covered. So if you're not filing grievances and being in contact with your representative all that often, or if you're not showing up to the other union-sponsored events because you might have a hectic or inconvenient schedule, you might fall to the wayside, which I have also experienced that in my own life, but also I guess it's a good thing that I don't have to keep filing grievances in my rights. But anywho, so that's unions. Another example that actually exists in our current world is something called a worker cooperative or a co-op. The employees are the owner-operators of the business and get to make those decisions themselves. The workplace structure, in my opinion, would actually be a really good baseline for the economy. But to do this, it would require a fundamental upheaval of our current structures where employers are on top and get their preferences enshrined through state mechanisms. And we'd also have to rid ourselves of the hold the wealthy and elite classes have on our society and in our political structure. I do plan to do a video devoted to lobbying, as I've said in the last video, which is how rich people basically are allowed to bribe politicians and get favorable legislation introduced and passed. But cooperatives, they follow 7 major principles. Voluntary and open membership. Basically just, anybody is allowed to have the option to join. Democratic member control. The members of that cooperative get to make all the democratic decisions that go into running the business. Members have economic participation. Basically, everybody got to show up, do their job, do the thing that they need to do. Autonomy and independence. Basically, it encourages workers to take charge of their own workplace instead of submitting to somebody else. Education, training, and information. Workers should constantly have that opportunity to grow and learn and have access to the information they need to be better in their own jobs. Cooperation among cooperatives. Obviously, if you're running a cooperatively owned business, you want to collaborate with other cooperatively owned businesses so you can, compare notes and keep cooperatives a strong network, actually. And then just concern for community. A lot of cooperatives do tend to be very community focused. They tend to want to, we'll get into some of the pros and cons here in a minute, and I'll actually cover a lot of it, so I won't get into it right now. But there are actually different kinds of co-ops. There are worker co-ops where workers are owner-operators. Consumer co-ops where it is owned by members who direct the co-op to purchase the goods and services, ensuring the availability of goods, like a credit union. Producer co-ops, basically producers band together for greater market share, which are usually businesses, not individuals, like Dairy Farmers of America. Purchasing co-ops, where the purchasers band together to improve purchasing power, again, usually businesses like Ace Hardware. And multi-stakeholder co-ops, which are owned and operated by a mix of members and workers, like Weaver Street Market. At least 12% of humanity is a cooperator in any of the 3 million cooperatives that are here on Earth. In a similar vein, there is collectives, which is just more general and refers to a structure that is non-hierarchical, though some decisions may be delegated to specific groups or individuals, but no one has power over anyone. They work towards a common goal that may not necessarily be economic, but social, and this can be formally or informally set up. Cooperative is ownership, but collective is management style, so usually both refer to no hierarchy, though. So let's go into the pros and cons. Co-ops. On the bright side, employees also being owners, they get to make more impact on the company's future, so your decisions actually matter to the company. Workers are also motivated to do well because, your name's attached to the company, so you want to do well because that would reflect on your contribution, right? As opposed to just being a cog in the machine where it's just like, I don't give a fuck about wasting this company's money. It's not mine. I'm not getting it at the end of the day. So it tends to make workers more productive since they have a say in what they're doing and they're invested in the company's success because it directly translates into their own success. Workers also get a say in what and how they do their jobs, which, good things all around, am I right? Workers usually engage in profit sharing when the company does well. There's also more equal distribution of power and influence in the company, and it encourages collaboration rather than competition, which is also good for morale and company culture. Tasks can still be delegated to people with specialized interests, knowledge, or skills, while still offering chances for them to share skills with the other owners of their co-op. Workers can also save money with the profit-sharing element and may allow them to have more money to spend in local shops and keep money in their communities and spread the wealth around. Co-op members can also learn other skills that can be valuable should they decide to move on to other jobs because they're taking on managerial and ownership tasks, so companies like leadership and managerial experience. Business ownership can also be far more attainable since the burden of startup costs can be cheaper when you spread them across more people. Co-ops also tend to be more resilient in crises because of the level of planning they rely on. as they may simply just adjust wages or benefits to keep on all of their staff. And on average, employee satisfaction tends to be higher in co-ops as the policies were made by them and for them, so naturally they can be happier when with your job when your interests are secured. And actually, for more information about co-ops, I highly recommend checking out the page Democracy at Work. It is run by Richard D. Wolff, who is a professor and who was taught at all the Ivy League schools, and a lot of his work is focused on co-ops. If you're also looking for somebody on TikTok, I highly suggest Madeline Pendleton. She owns the business Tunnel Vision based in California, and it is effectively run as a co-op with her and her employees, and she talks about all the benefits that they have and they provide and what kind of day-to-day operations of their business may look like. So I highly recommend it. Oh yeah, and another pro, flat hierarchy. There's not like a super there's the guy on top that has all the power. So it's like, no, we're all just kind of on the same playing field, man. Now there are the cons, obviously. They can be slower in decision making because you obviously have to consider more people's opinion. Co-ops can also be slower to growth when considering the longer decision making. Co-ops also tend to be less flexible in the sense that they would rather slightly lower wages than lose their staff. A Stanford study shows that co-ops may have 14% lower wages or more volatile wages, but less volatile employment. That said, some co-ops can also, when they get really successful, they can afford to pay more, so it's just kind of a pick of the litter, The less volatile employment, though, can create a situation where less competent people may be kept on for their interests at the expense of customer satisfaction. I also argue this can be countered with rearranging people around the company or with a general trend of higher productivity that tends to be found in co-ops as well. But like I said, you can also just move people to different departments. Like, hey, maybe you're just not a fit for this part of the job. Maybe we put you somewhere else. Sometimes co-ops operate with egalitarian wage structures, so more talented workers may be pushed out to pursue better wages. This does throw them to the volatility of capitalist firms, though, where you're kind of just at the leisure of the capitalist. But not all co-ops operate on egalitarian wages, basically everybody makes the same wage, but some businesses just find it easier. Again, Tunnel Vision, all of their employees have the same take-home pay per diem. So that is an example, but not all co-ops do this. So do your shopping if you want. Do your job shopping if you want. And also, there does tend to be a low-risk, low-reward mindset that can produce less profit and growth, but ensure stability. So, in my opinion, the profit is not the most important part. That's the money left over after the fact. But I kind of prefer stability in a business, one that is ready to ride the storm and knows how to navigate it, but that's just me. I could just have that. I'm not in it to get all the extra money. But anyhow. Now the third one, this is one, it's not necessarily common, but it's interesting to me. It is a workers' council or a work council, which is a group of elected employees that represent the interest of a company's workforce. It collaborates with management on key decisions within the company. This form largely seems to exist only in Germany, where there are strict labor laws seeking to protect the rights of employees. Formally, it is mandatory for companies with 5 or more permanent employees to have a workers' council, but companies can operate without them unless formally requested by the employees to hold an election to establish one. The workers' councils do work within the companies to focus on company-level matters that will impact employees and can work alongside unions. So, council elections in Germany, anyway, are held every 4 years. 2022s were held between March and May, but places without established councils can hold elections outside of that window. The election is overseen by an election committee consisting of employees. Employers must provide the committee with all the necessary information about the employees to perform this function. Votes are cast either for individual candidates or lists of candidates, and immediately after, the committee counts the votes and announces the outcome. Within a week, the committee has to call the first meeting of the new council. Employers must bear all the cost. Any employee 18 or older with at least 6 months at the company on a permanent basis is allowed to be on the council. The size of the council will depend on the company size, and you don't have to be a union member to be on this council. Members of the councils are granted specific rights. They are granted the right to information. They have to be informed on all discussions related to matters specified in the Works Constitution Act. They have the right to consultation, meaning they have to be consulted when specific issues are discussed, and their views must be listened to by management, and they are allowed to propose things directly to management. They also have the right to decline. If the council disagrees with the decision made by management, it can sometimes be deemed legally invalid. And the right to co-determination. It's the right to work, discuss, and negotiate with management on several social, hiring, and economic matters before they become official process, policy, or action, including issues with company processes, the hiring of temporary and full-time workers, wage and bonus structures, furlough, holiday policies, employee benefits, and dismissals. So let's go into the pros and cons real quick. The pros. They protect employees' rights. Companies without the council's oversight can lose employee rights in the top-level decisions, as opposed to the councils that protect those and enshrine those rights. They can also face increased wages because the company has to discuss wage issues with the council, which, since it's comprised of employees, wages are going to be higher because, us as employees, we don't want lower wages. We want enough to feed our families, man. There's also a unified voice to negotiate with employees. Again, the employees represented by the council will make sure their concerns are heard and be taken into consideration. It's also free for the employees to participate, so unlike a union, there's no dues. It, to me, kind of feels like a guild, except no dues, you know? There's also tends to be increased productivity because employees feel included in the company decisions, thus they feel incentivized to work harder because they feel valued and more content with the management. There's also special protections against dismissal when conflicts arise in any discussions. Councils are also made up of workers within the company. It's not an outside third party like a union, so I like that. And employees also get a say in hiring, which I have been saying we should always be involved in the hiring process, because how many times has your manager been like, oh, we hired you a new person, and you look at them, thing will last a week. Like, you can tell who's a fit for a company and who isn't when you work there. So it's just, I feel like employees should be included more in hiring processes. Now let's get to the cons. The costs, which can be pretty costly, are borne by the employer, and smaller companies may be more burdened by these costs. It also removes some employee freedoms because you're not going to agree with every decision made between the council and management, but are still bound by those. So, for example, like in a crisis, they may decide to reduce your hours or pay in lieu of firing people, but some people may not want the reduced hours or pay. Decisions can also take longer because, again, there's more people to include in the decision making, which can create more conflict. The argument can be made that managers or higher-ups may have specialized knowledge that employees may not have. So that's why I kind of like the idea of a cooperative. Like, you can still make somebody a manager in a cooperative. They just don't get, like, special power over you. Like, it still gets to be a collective decision about hiring and firing or whatever, but you know, some people also do just have special skills that may be more better suited for specific areas. And there's also the potential for corruption, which I also say is a con for a union, because sometimes they can just serve an employer's interest. Minority voices can also be shut out. Like, again, you may not agree with most of the people, but you're still bound to those decisions. So, effectively, I think overall we've learned economic democracy, it does a lot of good work for our communities, and it tends to it makes people a little more productive, tend to get better paid, better compensation in general, and just a general better sense of well-being. Because when you get to be involved in the decision-making process, you feel more incentivized to try harder and do more to help out your coworkers, because hey, you have a stake in the company doing well because your success, the company's success, translates to your success. Now that said, there can be the argument that not everybody may want to necessarily engage in a cooperative necessarily kind of environment, but I think we should hold space to be able to allow for both forms of companies and businesses to happen, because I think it can actually create healthy competition between them and incentivize both to elevate their standard and elevate the benefits that they have to offer. Now, you are free to continue to do your more research on your own about these things, but I will also link all of my sources in the comments or in the description box below. And as I said, please check out Democracy at Work on YouTube or democracyatwork.info, where they also have a lot more information about cooperatives as well. And I think with that, I think we're going to go ahead and call this video done. So until next time, see ya.